The sky above the small town of Maplewood, Ohio, turned an unnatural shade of orange as the sun dipped below the horizon. Emma Carter stood in her backyard, staring up at the strange glow that seemed to stretch endlessly across the heavens. She had always loved watching the stars, finding comfort in their distant light, but tonight something felt different, wrong. The air buzzed faintly, a low hum that vibrated through her chest and made the hairs on her arms stand on end. Her neighbor, Jake Miller, came running down the street, his face pale and his breaths uneven. "Emma," he called out, waving one hand wildly. "You need to see this." Emma turned toward him, her brow furrowing. "What's going on?" Jake didn't answer right away. Instead, he pointed upward, where several massive shapes now loomed against the darkening sky. They were ships, dozens of them, each larger than anything she'd ever seen before. Smooth and metallic, they glided silently, casting long shadows over the quiet town. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sheer size of the vessels was overwhelming, almost incomprehensible. Then, without warning, a voice boomed from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was deep and resonant, vibrating through the ground beneath their feet. "We have come to claim what is ours," it said, cold and emotionless. "Resistance will be met with destruction." Emma's heart raced. Her mind scrambled to make sense of what was happening. Aliens, an invasion. It sounded like something out of a movie, not real life. But there was no denying the evidence hovering ominously above them. Jake gripped her arm tightly. "We need to get out of here," he urged, pulling her toward his car parked by the curb. "If they're serious about resistance being destroyed, we don't want to stick around to find out." But Emma hesitated. Something about the message struck her as odd. Claiming what was theirs. Why hadn't they mentioned Earth specifically? Slowly, she pulled out her phone and opened a weather app, checking the GPS coordinates for their location. Then, tapping furiously, she brought up an old astronomy database she used for teaching her high school science class. As Jake continued to plead with her to leave, she compared numbers, her eyes widening with realization. "Jake, wait," she said finally, holding up a hand to stop him mid-sentence. I think they might not know where they are." He stared at her, confused. "What do you mean?" "They said Sector 427. That's not Earth." She pointed to her phone screen. "Look, these coordinates match a planet cataloged years ago by NASA, a place way outside our solar system. If I'm right, they've made a mistake. They think they're somewhere else entirely." Jake frowned, shaking his head. "Even if that's true, does it matter? They're still attacking us." "It matters," Emma insisted, her voice firm despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "If we can prove to them that they're wrong, maybe we can stop this before it gets worse." As the two debated, the first explosions echoed in the distance. Bright flashes lit up the edges of town, followed by plumes of smoke rising into the already chaotic sky. Maplewood wasn't just under attack. It was being torn apart. Emma knew they couldn't waste any more time. Whether or not her theory held water, humanity's survival might depend on proving the aliens' fatal error. And so, with trembling hands and racing hearts, Emma and Jake prepared to uncover the truth and hope it would be enough to save them all. The streets of Chicago were eerily quiet, save for the distant rumble of collapsing buildings and the occasional screech of alien machinery slicing through the air. Ryan Collins crouched behind the shattered remains of a bus stop, his rifle clutched tightly in his hands. His uniform was torn and smeared with dirt, but he barely noticed. All he could focus on was the drone hovering just a few blocks away, its sleek silver body glinting under the dim streetlights. Ryan's unit had been sent to hold the line, to buy time for civilians to evacuate. But holding the line was easier said than done. The aliens' weapons were unlike anything humanity had ever seen, beams of energy that cut through steel and flesh alike with terrifying efficiency. His squad had been decimated within minutes. Now Ryan was alone, trying to figure out what to do next. As he watched, the drone suddenly paused, its movements jerky and uncertain. It hovered in place, almost as if it were confused. Ryan frowned. Why would an advanced machine hesitate? Weren't these things supposed to be perfect killing machines? He shook his head, dismissing the thought. Maybe it didn't matter why. It just mattered that it gave him a chance. Taking a deep breath, Ryan darted across the street, slipping into the shadow of a crumbling building. He pressed his back against the cold brick wall, listening intently. The hum of the drone grew louder, then softer, as if it were scanning the area aimlessly. Ryan peeked around the corner, watching as the machine floated back toward the heart of the city. Whatever it had been looking for, it seemed to have given up. Back in Ohio, Emma Carter sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by papers and maps she pulled from her school's science supplies. Jake Miller paced nervously nearby, glancing out the window every few seconds to check for signs of danger. "We should have left already," he muttered, running a hand through his messy hair. "Every second we stay here is another second they could find us." "They won't come here," Emma replied calmly, though her voice betrayed a hint of nerves. "This town isn't important enough. They're targeting bigger cities, places with resources or military bases." She tapped one of the maps with her finger. "Look, this is the planet they mentioned. Sector 427. According to these old records, it's uninhabitable. No oxygen, no water, nothing useful. So why are they attacking Earth like it's that place?" Jake stopped pacing and leaned over her shoulder, studying the map. "You think they messed up their navigation system or something?" "It's possible," Emma said, nodding. "Their tech might be advanced, but even advanced tech can fail. Maybe they read the wrong star charts or relied on outdated data. If we can prove to them that they're in the wrong spot, maybe they'll leave." Jake sighed, rubbing his temples. "And how exactly do you plan to tell them that?" "Send them a postcard." Emma ignored his sarcasm and reached for her phone. Scrolling through her contacts, she found the number she needed. After a few rings, a tired-sounding man answered. "Dr. Brooks, it's Emma Carter. I need your help." On the other end of the line, Dr. Alan Brooks listened intently as Emma explained her theory. When she finished, there was a long pause. "That's actually plausible," he admitted finally. "If they're operating under the assumption that they're somewhere else, they might not realize the mistake until it's too late. But proving it won't be easy. You'd need hard evidence, something undeniable." "I know," Emma said, determination creeping into her tone. "But if we don't try, who will? This could be our only shot." Meanwhile, in the ruins of Chicago, Ryan stumbled upon a group of survivors huddled in the basement of an abandoned office building. Among them was Lisa Bennett, a woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She introduced herself quickly, explaining that she'd been part of a communications team before the invasion began. "We've got some old equipment down here," she told Ryan. "If we can get it working, maybe we can send a message to anyone who will listen." Ryan hesitated. He wasn't sure if a message would make a difference, but he didn't have a better idea. "All right," he said finally. "Let's see what we can do." As night fell, both groups worked feverishly, unaware that their efforts might soon intersect. Humanity's fate hung precariously in the balance, resting on the slim hope that the invaders could be made to see their error before it was too late. Emma and Jake moved cautiously through the deserted streets of Maplewood, their footsteps muffled by the thick layer of dust covering the ground. The town felt like a ghost of its former self. Windows shattered, cars abandoned, and an eerie silence hanging over everything. Their destination was the local library, one of the few places Emma knew still had old astronomy books and star charts that might help them gather more evidence. "This feels like a bad idea," Jake whispered as they approached the building. His voice was low, almost drowned out by the distant hum of alien ships in the sky. "What if someone sees us? Or worse, what if the aliens show up?" "We don't have a choice," Emma replied firmly, though her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the flashlight. If we're going to prove this theory, we need proof. Hard proof. Something even they can't ignore. The library's front doors were locked, but Jake managed to pry them open with a crowbar he brought along. Inside, the air smelled musty, and the shelves were cluttered with books left behind when the staff fled. Emma immediately headed for the science section, her eyes scanning the titles until she found what she was looking for: a collection of astronomy textbooks and maps from decades ago. "Here," she said, pulling down a heavy book and laying it on a nearby table. She flipped through the pages quickly, searching for references to Sector 427. Jake joined her, holding the flashlight steady as she worked. After a few tense minutes, she found it: a detailed description of the exoplanet cataloged under that name. According to the text, Sector 427 was located light years away from Earth, orbiting a dying star. Its atmosphere was toxic, and its surface was barren, making it completely unsuitable for life. "They couldn't have picked a worse target," Jake muttered, shaking his head. "So why are they here instead?" "That's the question, isn't it?" Emma said, jotting down notes in a small notebook she brought with her. "Maybe their navigation system malfunctioned, or maybe they're using outdated data. Either way, we need to show them this information clearly." As they gathered more materials, Jake noticed something strange. A faint peeping sound echoed through the library, growing louder with each passing second. "Do you hear that?" he asked, glancing around nervously. Emma froze, listening. "It's coming from outside." They rushed to the window and peered out cautiously. In the distance, a group of civilians was running toward the library, shouting and waving their arms. Behind them, 2 alien drones floated ominously, their glowing red sensors sweeping back and forth. The civilians looked terrified, and it was clear they were being pursued. "We can't let them find us," Jake hissed, grabbing Emma's arm. "If those things spot us, we're done." Emma hesitated, torn between helping the people outside and protecting their work. But there wasn't time to debate. The drones were getting closer, and the civilians were heading straight for the library. "We need to hide," she said finally, stuffing the books and notes into a backpack. They hurried to the back of the building, ducking into a storage room just as the front doors burst open. Heavy footsteps echoed through the halls as the civilians rushed inside, followed closely by the drones. Emma and Jake held their breath, pressing themselves against the wall as the machines scanned the area. For several agonizing moments, it seemed like the drones would discover them. Then, just as suddenly as they had arrived, the machines turned and floated back outside. When the coast was clear, Emma and Jake emerged from their hiding spot, hearts pounding. "We got lucky," Jake said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Too lucky." Emma nodded, slinging the backpack over her shoulder. "We need to get this information somewhere safe, somewhere we can use it." Unbeknownst to them, miles away in Chicago, Ryan and Lisa were working on a similar plan. Using salvaged parts from the basement, they had managed to rig together a crude transmitter. It wasn't much, but it was enough to send a basic signal. Lisa tapped furiously at the keyboard of an old laptop, her fingers flying across the keys. "If we can boost the range, we might be able to reach their command ship," she said, her voice filled with determination. Ryan watched her work, feeling a flicker of hope for the first time in days. Maybe, just maybe, they could turn the tide. But deep down, he knew the hardest part was yet to come. The sun had long since set, leaving the world cloaked in darkness. Emma and Jake moved quickly through the shadows, their footsteps soft but urgent. They carried the backpack filled with books, maps, and notes, knowing it held the key to proving Earth wasn't the aliens' intended target. The problem was figuring out how to get that proof into the right hands, or rather, the right ships. "This isn't going to work," Jake muttered under his breath as they approached an old radio station on the outskirts of town. Its crumbling brick walls and broken windows made it look like a relic from another era. "Even if we send a message, how do we know they'll listen? What if they just blow us up instead?" Emma didn't answer right away. She adjusted the strap of the backpack on her shoulder and pushed open the rusted gate leading to the station. "We don't have a choice," she said finally, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. "If we don't try, nothing changes. We can't fight them head on. So this is our best shot." Inside, the station was a mess of tangled wires, broken equipment, and dust-covered furniture. But in one corner, miraculously intact, stood an old satellite dish mounted on the roof. It was battered and weathered, but Emma's eyes lit up when she saw it. "This could work," she said, pointing to the dish. "If we can connect it to a transmitter, we might be able to send a signal strong enough for them to pick up." Jake groaned, running a hand through his hair. "And where exactly are we supposed to find a transmitter? This place looks like it hasn't been used in decades." Before Emma could respond, a voice called out from behind them. "You two look like you could use some help." They spun around to see a man standing in the doorway, silhouetted by the dim moonlight streaming in. He was broad-shouldered and wore grease-stained overalls, holding a toolbox in one hand. His face was lined with age, but his eyes were sharp and curious. "I'm Sam Parker," he said, stepping inside. "I saw your lights from down the road. Figured I'd come check it out. Aliens dropping out of the sky tends to make people nervous." Emma hesitated, unsure whether to trust him. But time was running out, and they needed all the help they could get. "We're trying to send a message to the alien ships," she explained quickly, "to prove they've made a mistake. Do you know anything about fixing transmitters?" Sam raised an eyebrow, but nodded. "Might say I do. Used to tinker with radios and satellite gear back in the day. Let me take a look." For the next hour, the three of them worked together, dismantling old equipment and piecing together something functional. Sam proved invaluable, his hands moving deftly as he rewired circuits and connected cables. Meanwhile, Emma prepared the message, carefully encoding their findings into simple patterns and mathematical equations, universal languages anyone, even aliens, might understand. As dawn began to break, the makeshift device was ready. The satellite dish hummed faintly as it powered on, its surface reflecting the pale morning light. Emma took a deep breath and pressed the button to transmit the signal. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, far above them, the alien ships seemed to pause mid-flight, their movements halting as if they were listening. "They got it," Emma whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of relief and disbelief. "They heard us." But before they could celebrate, the ground shook violently. A low rumble echoed through the air, growing louder until it became deafening. The trio exchanged worried glances as the alien ships began to move again, this time descending closer to the planet's surface. "What now?" Jake asked, clutching the edge of the table for support. Emma clenched her fists, determination hardening her expression. "Now, we wait, and hope they believe us." In Chicago, Ryan and Lisa sat huddled in the basement, staring at the laptop screen. Their own transmission attempt had gone silent hours ago, and they had no way of knowing if it had reached the alien command ship. Exhaustion weighed heavily on both of them, but neither dared to rest. Suddenly, the computer beeped softly. A new signal appeared on the screen. A response. It was garbled and fragmented, but Lisa managed to decode parts of it. Her eyes widened as she read the text aloud. "They acknowledge a discrepancy. Coordinates incorrect." Ryan leaned forward, his heart racing. "Does that mean what I think it means?" Lisa nodded slowly, a small smile breaking through her tired expression. "They know they're in the wrong place." For the first time in days, there was a flicker of hope. But as the words sank in, reality hit them both. Even if the aliens realized their mistake, would they leave peacefully? Or would Earth still pay the price for their error? Outside, the skies remained dark, the future uncertain. The alien ships hung low in the sky, their metallic surfaces reflecting the pale morning light. Emma, Jake, and Sam stood outside the old radio station, watching as the massive vessels seemed to hover uncertainly. The ground vibrated faintly beneath their feet, a constant reminder of the power these machines possessed. Despite the signal they had sent, none of them felt safe. Hope was fragile, and fear still clung to every thought. "We did what we could," Emma said softly, her voice barely audible over the hum of the ships. "Now we wait." Jake glanced at her, his face tense. "And if they don't like what we told them? What if they decide to finish the job anyway?" Sam tightened his grip on a wrench he'd been carrying since they left the station. "Then we fight back however we can. But let's not borrow trouble yet. They're smart enough to build those things up there. They'll figure out we're telling the truth." Emma nodded, though she wasn't entirely convinced. She knew the aliens might not care about mistakes or explanations. All that mattered now was how they would respond, and whether humanity had any say in what came next. Far away, in the heart of Chicago, Ryan and Lisa were dealing with their own uncertainty. After receiving the fragmented response from the alien command ship, they realized they weren't alone in trying to reach out. Someone else, possibly Emma and her group, had also sent a message. The realization gave them a small sense of relief, but it didn't change the fact that they were trapped in a crumbling city surrounded by chaos. "We need to get this information to more people," Lisa said, closing the laptop and stuffing it into a backpack. "If others know about the mistake, maybe we can organize something bigger, a global effort to make them leave." Ryan frowned, scanning the darkened streets through a crack in the basement wall. "Easier said than done. Most communication systems are down, and even if they weren't, who knows how many people are left to hear us." Lisa hesitated, then slung the backpack over her shoulder. "Then we go find someone who can help. There's got to be other survivors, other groups working on this. We can't just sit here and hope for the best." Reluctantly, Ryan agreed. Together, they gathered what supplies they could carry and stepped cautiously into the ruins of the city. Every step felt dangerous, every shadow a potential threat. Alien drones patrolled overhead, their red sensors scanning the ground below. Ryan kept his rifle ready, knowing it wouldn't do much against their advanced technology, but it made him feel slightly less helpless. As they moved, Lisa noticed something unusual, a faint blinking light coming from a nearby building. It was rhythmic, almost like a signal. "Do you see that?" she whispered, pointing toward the source. Ryan squinted, trying to make out the details. Could be a trap, or it could be someone else trying to reach out. "Either way, we should check it out," Lisa replied firmly. "We're running out of options." They crept closer, staying close to the walls to avoid detection. When they reached the building, they found a group of survivors huddled inside, led by a wiry man named Kyle. He introduced himself quickly, explaining that his team had been attempting to track alien movements using scavenged tech. "We've picked up some weird signals lately," he said, gesturing to a pile of equipment in the corner. "Looks like someone's talking to them. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you?" Lisa exchanged a glance with Ryan before nodding. "We've been trying to send messages to prove they're in the wrong place." Kyle's eyes widened. "You think they'll listen?" "It's all we got," Ryan admitted. "But if we combine our efforts, maybe we can strengthen the signal. Make sure they can't ignore us." For the first time in days, there was a flicker of unity among the survivors. They worked together, pooling their resources and knowledge to improve the transmission. Kyle's team contributed a powerful antenna they'd salvage, while Lisa fine-tuned the message to include both mathematical patterns and simple language. As night fell, the newly upgraded transmitter hummed to life. The group held their breath, watching the skies anxiously. Above them, the alien ships began to shift, their movements slower and more deliberate. It was impossible to tell what they were thinking, or if they understood, but for the first time, there was a glimmer of hope. Emma, miles away, felt the same quiet optimism as she stared at the ships above. Humanity's fate rested in the hands of beings who saw Earth as nothing more than a miscalculation. Whether they chose mercy or destruction remained to be seen, but one thing was certain: The fight for survival was far from over. The bunker was dimly lit, the air thick with tension, and the faint smell of damp concrete. Lisa sat at a makeshift desk, her fingers flying across the keyboard of an old laptop as she tried to decode fragments of the alien language. The screen flickered occasionally, but she didn't stop. Every second counted. Beside her, Ryan paced back and forth, his rifle slung over his shoulder, his eyes darting toward the entrance every few moments. "We're running out of time," he muttered under his breath. "They've stopped moving, but that doesn't mean they're leaving." Lisa ignored him for a moment, focusing on the task at hand. Using software designed to decipher ancient texts, she managed to piece together bits of the aliens' communication logs. Her brow furrowed as she read through the fragmented translations. Finally, she leaned back in her chair, letting out a long breath. "They thought Earth was Sector 427, she said, her voice steadied despite the weight of the discovery. Their mission was to strip mine the planet for resources. They didn't even consider the possibility of intelligent life being here." Ryan stopped pacing and turned to look at her. "So they just assumed it was empty. That's reckless." "It's worse than that," Lisa replied, shaking her head. "From what I can tell, their leaders planned this operation based on outdated data. Someone messed up big time, and now they're stuck trying to fix it without looking weak." Kyle, who had been listening quietly from across the room, spoke up. "If they admit they made a mistake, they'll lose face, maybe even authority. No wonder they're hesitating." Lisa nodded. "Exactly. But if we can make them see that continuing the attack won't solve anything, maybe we can push them to leave." Ryan crossed his arms, frowning. "How do we do that?" "Send them a nicely worded email." "No," Lisa said firmly. "We give them proof. Solid evidence that Earth isn't their target. And we remind them of the cost of staying here. We've already hit some of their ships. If they keep fighting, they'll lose more." Meanwhile, Emma, Jake, and Sam were facing challenges of their own. After transmitting their message from the old radio station, they decided to head toward the nearest major city to find help. The journey was dangerous, with alien patrols scattered throughout the countryside. At one point, they narrowly avoided detection by hiding in an abandoned farmhouse while the drone passed overhead. "This is insane," Jake whispered as they crouched behind a toppled fence. "We're walking straight into a war zone." Emma glanced at him, her expression resolute. "I know, but if we don't try, nothing changes. Besides, we're not alone anymore. Other people are working on this too." Sam adjusted the backpack holding their equipment, his jaw tightening. "Let's just hope those other people are as smart as you." As they approached the outskirts of Columbus, Ohio, they encountered another group of survivors led by a woman named Claire. She was skeptical at first, eyeing them warily as they explained their mission. But when Emma showed her the star charts and decoded messages, Claire's skepticism turned to cautious optimism. "You really think this will work?" Claire asked, flipping through the pages of Emma's notebook. "It has to," Emma replied. "We don't have any other options." Claire nodded slowly. "All right, we'll help, but we need to move fast. The aliens aren't going to wait around forever." Together, the two groups pooled their resources and set up a new transmission site in a partially collapsed office building. Using a combination of salvaged electronics and Claire's knowledge of engineering, they boosted the signal strength significantly. As the machine hummed to life, Emma felt a surge of hope, but also fear. What if the aliens didn't care about the truth? What if admitting their mistake wasn't enough? Far above, the alien ships remained eerily still, as though waiting. Humanity's fate hung in the balance, resting on the slim chance that logic and reason could prevail over pride and aggression. For now, all anyone could do was wait, and pray that the invaders would listen before it was too late. The tension in the air was unbearable. Emma stood on the rooftop of the crumbling office building, staring up at the alien ships that loomed like silent giants above Columbus. The transmitter they had built sat humming softly behind her, its antenna pointed skyward. Jake and Sam were nearby, keeping watch for any signs of movement from the ground, while Claire worked with Emma to ensure the signal stayed strong. "It's been almost an hour," Jake said, his voice low but edged with frustration. "Why aren't they responding?" "Maybe they're still processing it," Emma replied, though she sounded less confident than she wanted to. Her hands tightened around the railing as she tried to push back the doubt creeping into her mind. What if their message wasn't clear enough? Or worse, what if the aliens didn't care about being wrong? Sam leaned against a pile of debris, wiping sweat from his forehead. "If I were them, I'd be pretty mad about screwing up this bad. Coming all this way for nothing. That's embarrassing." Claire shook her head, adjusting one of the cables connected to the transmitter. "It's not just embarrassment. Think about it. They've already attacked us. Even if they realize they made a mistake, backing down now would look weak. And weakness can be dangerous when you're dealing with something like them." Emma sighed, glancing at the others. "Then we have to make sure they understand there's no point in staying. They've lost ships, wasted resources. Maybe they'll see that leaving is the smarter choice." As if on cue, the hum of the transmitter grew louder, followed by a sharp crackle of static. Everyone froze, their eyes darting toward the device. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, a distorted voice began to echo through the makeshift speakers, deep, mechanical, and cold. "You claim error," the voice said, each word deliberate and clipped. "Explain." Emma's heart raced. She stepped closer to the microphone, her hands trembling slightly as she spoke. "This planet is Earth. It is not Sector 427. Your coordinates are wrong. We are sending proof." She paused, motioning for Claire to send the encoded data they had prepared. The star charts, mathematical patterns, and other evidence proving the aliens' mistake. There was another long silence, during which no one dared to breathe. Finally, the voice returned, tinged with what almost sounded like irritation. "Data received. Analysis required." "That's it," Jake blurted out, throwing his arms up in disbelief. "They attack us, nearly destroy half the planet, and all they say is analysis required." "They're not human," Emma reminded him gently. "Their thought process isn't going to be the same as ours. Just because they're advanced doesn't mean they're perfect." In Chicago, Ryan and Lisa listened intently as their own equipment picked up fragments of the transmission. The bunker buzzed with nervous energy as Kyle and his team pieced together the conversation between Emma's group and the alien command ship. "They know," Lisa whispered, her eyes wide with a mixture of relief and dread. "They'd finally know they're in the wrong place." Ryan frowned, pacing again. "But knowing doesn't mean they'll leave. If anything, they might double down to save face." Kyle nodded grimly. "He's right. This could go either way. They could cut their losses and leave, or they could decide to finish what they started to cover up the mess." Lisa clenched her fists, determination hardening her expression. "Then we keep pushing. We remind them how much resistance they'll face if they stay. Maybe we can organize a global broadcast, get everyone who's left to send the same message." Ryan hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "It's risky, but it's better than sitting here waiting for them to make up their minds." Back in Columbus, the wait dragged on. Hours passed without further communication from the aliens. The ships remained motionless, casting long shadows over the city as dusk approached. Emma and the others stayed on the rooftop, unwilling to abandon their post. "We should rest," Claire suggested eventually, breaking the silence. "We're no good to anyone if we collapse from exhaustion." Emma shook her head stubbornly. "Not yet. Not until we know for sure." As night fell, the first sign of change came, not from the ships, but from the ground below. A convoy of military vehicles rolled into view, carrying soldiers and supplies. Among them was a man in uniform who introduced himself as Captain Harris. He explained that scattered groups of survivors were beginning to coordinate efforts, sharing information and resources to fight back against the invasion. "We heard about your work," he told Emma, his tone respectful but urgent. "You've given us hope. But we need more than hope. We need action. Are you ready to take this to the next level?" Emma looked at Jake, Sam, and Claire, seeing the same mix of fear and resolve in their eyes that she felt in her own chest. Taking a deep breath, she turned back to the captain. "Yes," she said firmly. "We're ready." Above them, the alien ships shifted slightly, their movements slow and deliberate. Whether it was a sign of decision or indecision, no one could say. But one thing was certain: humanity's fight was far from over. The alien ships began to move again, their sleek forms gliding silently across the sky. Emma watched from the rooftop, her heart pounding as she tried to decipher their intentions. Were they leaving, preparing for another attack, or simply repositioning themselves? The uncertainty was maddening. Captain Harris stood beside her, binoculars in hand, scanning the horizon. "Whatever they're planning, we need to be ready," he said, his voice calm but firm. "If they decide to retaliate, we'll need every advantage we can get." Jake paced nervously, his boots scuffing against the cracked concrete. They'd had hours to think about this. Why haven't they done anything yet? "Maybe they're debating," Sam suggested, adjusting the strap of the backpack slung over his shoulder. "Even aliens have bosses, right? Someone's got to make the call." Claire shook her head, her expression grim. "Or maybe they're testing us, seeing how we react while they figure out their next move." Emma didn't respond. She stared up at the ships, replaying the earlier transmission in her mind. The aliens had acknowledged the evidence, but their tone had been cold and detached. There was no apology, no sign of remorse for the destruction they had caused. It was clear they viewed Earth not as a home to living beings, but as a problem to solve. "We need to keep pushing," Emma said finally, breaking the silence. "If they're hesitating, it means they're unsure. We can use that." Captain Harris nodded. "Agreed. But we also need to prepare for the worst. I've already sent word to other groups. We're organizing a coordinated effort. If the aliens refuse to leave peacefully, we'll hit them hard enough to make staying too costly." In Chicago, Ryan and Lisa were working on a similar plan. With Kyle's help, they had managed to boost the range of their transmitter, allowing them to send messages to other survivor networks scattered across the country. Each group contributed what they could: intel, resources, even weapons salvaged from abandoned military bases. "We're building something bigger than ourselves," Lisa said, her voice filled with quiet determination as she typed furiously on the laptop. "If we can unite everyone under one message, maybe we can force the aliens to listen." Ryan glanced at her, his brow furrowed. "And if they don't? What then?" "Then we fight," Kyle interjected, his tone matter-of-fact. "Not because we want to, but because we have to. This is our planet. We're not giving it up without a fight." Lisa hesitated, then nodded. "Exactly. But let's hope it doesn't come to that." As the night wore on, the bunker buzzed with activity. Maps were spread out on tables, marked with locations of alien patrols and potential safe zones. Radios crackled with updates from other groups, each confirming their readiness to act. For the first time since the invasion began, there was a sense of unity, a fragile but powerful bond forged by shared desperation. Back in Columbus, Emma and her group joined Captain Harris in strategizing. Using the star charts and decoded data, they crafted a new message aimed directly at the alien command ship. This time, the tone was firmer, more assertive. They highlighted humanity's resilience, emphasizing that continued aggression would only lead to greater losses for both sides. "You think they'll understand?" Claire asked as Emma double-checked the transmission. "They'll have to," Emma replied, her voice steady despite the weight of the situation. "We've given them proof, logic, and now a warning. If they ignore all three, they'll leave us no choice but to defend ourselves." When the message was sent, the wait felt longer than ever. The alien ships remained eerily still, their movements minimal but deliberate. Finally, just as dawn began to break, a response came through. The distorted voice echoed once more, colder than before. Analysis complete. Error confirmed. However, mission parameters cannot be abandoned without consequence. Proposal. Negotiation. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Negotiation. What did that mean? Would the aliens demand something in return for leaving? Or were they stalling, buying time to regroup? Emma exchanged a glance with Captain Harris, who looked equally puzzled. "This changes things," he said after a moment. "But it doesn't mean we trust them. Stay sharp." As the sun rose, casting a pale light over the battered city, humanity found itself at a crossroads. The aliens had admitted their mistake, but their willingness to negotiate raised more questions than answers. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain. Survival would require not just courage, but wisdom, and perhaps a little luck. The word negotiation echoed in Emma's mind as she stood on the rooftop, staring at the alien ships. It was a strange concept, aliens wanting to talk after everything they had done. She felt a mix of hope and unease. Could humanity really sit down with beings who saw Earth as nothing more than a resource to exploit? And what would they demand in exchange for leaving? Captain Harris broke the silence. "This is uncharted territory," he said, his voice measured but firm. "We've never dealt with something like this before, but if they're willing to talk, we need to be ready." Emma nodded, her thoughts racing. They admitted their mistake, but that doesn't mean they'll leave without getting something in return. We have to figure out what they want, and decide how far we're willing to go to get them off our planet. Jake frowned, crossing his arms. What if they ask for something impossible, like half the world's resources or, I don't know, hostages? "Then we say no," Claire replied sharply. "But we can't assume the worst just yet. Let's hear them out first." Sam adjusted his backpack, glancing nervously at the ships above. "Who even gets to do the talking? I mean, it's not like any of us are diplomats." Emma hesitated, then stepped forward. "I'll do it." Her voice was steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. "I've been part of this from the start. If anyone can explain our side, it's me." Captain Harris studied her for a moment, then gave a slow nod. "All right, but you won't go alone. We'll set up a team to support you, just in case things go south." In Chicago, Ryan and Lisa listened as news of the aliens' proposal spread through the survivor networks. The bunker buzzed with debate as people argued over whether negotiation was even possible or wise. "They attacked us first," one man growled, slamming his fist on the table. "Why should we trust them now?" "Because we don't have a choice," Lisa countered, her tone calm but firm. "Fighting them head-on hasn't worked so far. If we can end this peacefully, shouldn't we try?" Ryan leaned against the wall, his arms crossed. "Peacefully sounds nice in theory, but these aren't humans. They might not think the way we do. What if negotiation is just code for stalling while they prepare for another attack?" Kyle shook his head. "We can't let fear dictate every move we make. If there's a chance to avoid more bloodshed, we take it. But we stay ready for anything." As the discussion continued, Lisa drafted a message to share with other groups, urging caution and cooperation. "Whatever happens next, we stick together," she said. "If the aliens see that we're united, they'll think twice about pushing us too far." Back in Columbus, preparations for the negotiation began. Captain Harris gathered representatives from different survivor groups, including Emma, Jake, and Claire. Together, they worked on a strategy, outlining their demands and setting clear boundaries. "We want them gone," Emma said firmly during one meeting. "No deals, no compromises. But if they insist on taking something, we limit it to non-essential resources. Nothing that harms the planet or its people." Claire added, "And we document everything. Every conversation, every agreement. If they try to twist things later, we'll have proof." As the hours passed, the tension in the air grew thicker. Finally, the aliens sent another transmission, requesting a meeting location. A remote field outside Columbus was chosen, a neutral zone where both sides could gather without risking further conflict. On the morning of the negotiation, Emma and her team arrived early, flanked by soldiers armed with whatever weapons they could salvage. The alien delegation descended shortly after, their sleek shuttle landing silently in the middle of the field. When the door opened, two figures emerged, tall, metallic, and eerily humanoid. Emma took a deep breath, stepping forward. "We're here to discuss your departure," she began, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. "Earth is not your target. You've made a mistake, and it's time to correct it." One of the aliens tilted its head, its glowing eyes scanning the group. "Departure requires compensation," it replied, its voice cold and mechanical. "Resources expended must be repaid." Emma exchanged a glance with Captain Harris, then turned back to the aliens. "Compensation isn't an option. You attacked us. You caused destruction. Leaving peacefully is the only acceptable outcome." The aliens didn't respond immediately, their movements slow and deliberate. For a moment, it seemed like the negotiation might collapse before it even began. Then, finally, one of them spoke again. "Terms will be discussed. Further communication forthcoming." With that, they turned and re-entered their shuttle, which lifted off moments later, disappearing into the sky. Emma exhaled slowly, relief washing over her, but only for a moment. The aliens hadn't agreed to leave, and their vague promise of further discussion left too much room for uncertainty. Whatever happened next, humanity wasn't out of danger yet. The days following the negotiation were tense and uncertain. The aliens had promised further communication, but their silence stretched on longer than anyone expected. Emma found herself pacing the rooftop of the office building, staring at the sky, as if willing the alien ships to make a move. Jake and Sam kept busy repairing equipment and reinforcing defenses, while Claire worked with Captain Harris to coordinate supplies among the survivor groups. Despite their efforts, the lack of clarity from the invaders left everyone on edge. "They're stalling," Ryan said during one of the nightly radio check-ins between Columbus and Chicago. His voice crackled over the line, heavy with frustration. "If they were serious about leaving, they'd have done it by now." Lisa sighed, rubbing her temples. "Maybe. Or maybe they're trying to figure out how to save face after admitting they screwed up. Either way, we can't let our guard down." Emma listened quietly to their conversation, her mind racing. She knew Ryan was right. The delay wasn't a good sign, but there was nothing they could do except wait and prepare for whatever came next. Finally, after nearly a week of silence, the aliens transmitted another message. It was brief and direct. Compensation accepted. Technology in exchange for departure. Emma read the words aloud to the group gathered in the makeshift command center. The room fell silent as everyone processed what it meant. The aliens weren't just asking for resources. They wanted humanity's knowledge, its advancements, as payment for leaving. "This is blackmail," Jake muttered, shaking his head. "They know we don't have a choice." "We do have a choice," Emma replied firmly. "We decide what we're willing to give, and what we're not. If we hand over too much, we risk losing control of our own future." Captain Harris nodded, leaning forward on the table. "Agreed. We'll offer limited access to non-critical technology, things that won't harm us if they take them. But anything beyond that is off the table." In Chicago, Ryan and Lisa worked with Kyle to compile a list of acceptable trade-offs. They included outdated satellite designs, basic robotics blueprints, and other pieces of tech that wouldn't put humanity at a disadvantage. When the list was complete, they sent it to Columbus to be reviewed by Emma and her team. "It's not perfect," Lisa admitted, staring at the screen. "But it's better than giving them everything." Ryan clenched his fists, his jaw tight. "Let's just hope they agree to it. I don't trust them to play fair." Back in Columbus, Emma finalized the proposal and transmitted it to the alien command ship. Hours passed before they responded. When they did, their message was curt but clear. Terms accepted. Departure imminent. Relief swept through the group, though it was tempered by caution. The aliens hadn't specified when they would leave or how long it would take. For now, all they could do was watch and wait. Over the next few days, the massive ships began to ascend into the atmosphere, their movements slow but steady. As the last of them disappeared into the clouds, a strange quiet settled over the world, a silence broken only by the sounds of rebuilding and recovery. Emma stood on the rooftop one final time, gazing at the empty sky. The victory felt hollow. Humanity had survived, but at a cost. Cities lay in ruins, lives had been lost, and the scars of the invasion would linger for generations. Jake joined her, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. "Do you think they'll come back?" Emma hesitated, then shook her head. "I don't know, but if they do, we'll be ready." As the sun set over Columbus, painting the horizon in shades of orange and red, Emma allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. The aliens' mistake had brought Earth to the brink of destruction, but it had also united humanity in ways no one could have predicted. Moving forward wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in weeks, there was hope. And sometimes, hope was enough.